Let's get the show started. I'm Kennedy. The widow of the fallen soldier at the center of the controversy says she still has a lot of questions about her husband's death. Watch.
I want to know why it took them 48 hours to find my husband. Why couldn't I see my husband? Every time I asked to see my husband, they wouldn't let me.
So why has this story become so politicized? And is race really the issue here? Well, let me ask my diamond-started party panel from the Greg Gutfeld Show. She is their correspondent. Kat Timpf is here, along with the Blaze TV and radio host Lawrence Jones, and a columnist at the Daily Beast and The Week. Anthony Fisher is here. Anthony, are we asking the wrong questions?
Maybe. I prefer to.
So forceful.
Yeah. Yes. Because I'm with you that I do think the calls are not his strength. He's not a warm person. He's never, even his supporters wouldn't say. Well, I mean, some have, but he's not the kind of person who's got a way with words, and you know, empathy is not his thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, get somebody to write a nice letter, get it out fast, get it out. Move past that issue, and then deal with what went wrong with the mission, and perhaps. Since you campaigned on non-interventionism, maybe say, hey, Congress, why don't we reauthorize the use of military force?
Yeah,
why don't we not use this 16-year-old document that we passed almost unanimously to fight al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, one very specific mission, and not use it for 13 different countries, Niger being one of them.
Yeah, and when Frederica Wilson claims that the White House is full of white supremacists, I think it takes away from, if her goal is to protect her constituents and to help this family through the process, I don't think that language is very helpful.
She's asking for a moment to rally the resistance. She's trying to replicate what Maxine Waters did by using this extreme rhetoric for her base. Can I just say first, though, I feel for Miss Johnson because I do feel like she was hurt in the situation.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like the president intended to hurt her, but she's clearly hurt. The questions that she's asking, I don't think is unreasonable.
I don't think so either.
Why it took 48 hours to find him as well. I don't know if there was malicious or anything. I don't think it was, but she deserved that.
She deserves answers, absolutely. Why can't you see her husband?
Exactly.
I don't blame her. I mean, those
totally agree. But the Congresswoman, she has a different agenda. Now, one thing
it is her agenda. It is not about the family. It is all about her.
And she says that she's a mentor, which she may have been, but she's using this for a political game. One thing I disagree with is that I do believe that the president should continue to make these phone calls. I think it's a nice gesture. What the president lacks, though, and it's something that has hurt him in moments, is humility.
Yeah.
And the fact that she was hurt, he should have been man enough to apologize and say, you know what, that wasn't my intention. If it came off that way, I wasn't trying to do that. But he lacks humility, and so that exploded this situation another way. But I do think a lot of people would be grateful to get a call from the president to say, hey, we appreciate your service.
Yeah. And there was another family who released a phone call where the president was, better behaved, shall we say. So where do we go from here?
I mean, I'd like to actually start talking about him and what happened and ask those questions like everyone has said. I can't believe we're still doing the it's still, and it seems to be without end. And, John Kelly, of course, I think he should apologize. He obviously lied. He said she said something that she didn't say. And we're all just so used to that now, right? A politician, anybody in office of government, you can just lie, I guess.
We expected better from Kelly.
You just lie. I did expect better from him.
Yeah, he's supposed to be the savior of the White House. Now, speaking of saviors of the White House, and we're going to have more on this issue a little bit with Buck Sexton. He's going to explain why U.S. troops are in places like Niger. In the meantime, the president actually has a new defender. A surprising one, former president and staunch liberal Jimmy Carter. In an interview with the New York Times, Carter said that Trump has been treated worse by the media than any president in U.S. history. He also backed the president's belief that the NFL players should stand during the national anthem. And he also voted for Bernie Sanders. So is the progressive peanut farmer from Georgia a traitor to his party, or should politicians follow his lead and reach across the aisle? Obviously, Carter has some long simmering resentments against the press. He feels like he was poorly treated. He says this president's been treated worse than any president ever. But you say what?
Well, I mean, President Carter had interest rates at about 20% when he was president, so there, he might have, had a few things that he could have controlled to get better press. He's right. I don't think any president has ever been treated as rough as President Trump, but I think that misses the point that every other president should be treated a lot more rough. And, you know, just like we should, the media should be skeptical. The media should not be just kind of feeding, you know, easily digestible questions that, you know, PR flaks can hit back to them. And I also kind of appreciate somebody like President Carter not being able to fit in a perfect team blue, team red box.
Exactly.
He scrambled the whole thing up.
It's nice. He did scramble the whole thing up. And, you know, it's like he has better perspective. He's toward the end of his life. He's battling and winning his battle against brain cancer. And it's, you know, it's pretty impressive. I think it's funny he didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, that he and his wife voted for Bernie. And he also says that the whole Russian thing is a road to nowhere.
He's being honest. And you know what? I think politics needs some honesty today. I think you're being intellectually dishonest if you don't think Donald Trump's been treated worse than any other president. I mean, it's just a clear fact, the way they have been so partisan in their coverage of him. One thing I do think, though, I think President Carter is aiming for some type of position, though. It seems like he's coming more out in the spotlight.
It's interesting, yeah.
I don't know what his motives are, but it seems like he
No, but he's sort of nominated himself as an envoy to go talk diplomatically with North Korea. How will President Trump treat future presidents, do you think?
Oh boy, I think he'll have a great time. I think any positive story ever, he'll have a great time just saying, see, this kind of coverage never happened to me, hashtag fake news. He's never going to stop. He's having too much fun. Why would he ever stop? But I agree with Anthony that obviously he's getting treated worse, but it's kind of better to see the media actually doing its job rather than the, you know, when Obama was president, and it was like, how to get Michelle Obama's fall look, and it was like, that was the, you know,
great bite.
That was the idea of an expose.
All right, well, we have much more with the panel a little bit later in the show, and we will see them in just a little bit. First up, Republicans have been railing against Obamacare for nearly 8 years. They have been promising to repeal and replace it since before the ink dried, but now in a remarkable turn of events, it could be Democrats who take the victory lap. A judge here in New York says that the NYPD deserves to have, quote, an expose written on them for their incompetence they've shown with civil asset forfeiture. That's when police, of course, seize money and property from people just because they suspect they're guilty of a crime. This all started in 2014 when a legal aid group tried to study the NYPD's records of asset forfeiture through a Freedom of Information request, despite the fact that the city paid a contractor $25 million to design a database just for asset forfeiture. A city attorney says the NYPD lacks the technical capability to search information in its database. On top of that, they reportedly don't have a backup of the data. We do know that the city has seized at least $68 million through asset forfeiture. Most of that is defaulted on after the deadline passes for property owners to go through the bureaucratic Kafkaesque process of trying to get it back. Now, for their part, the NYPD has said the media reports are wrong and their asset forfeiture data is backed up in multiple places. Regardless, should police even be allowed to seize people's property on a hunch? The party panel is back. Kat Timpf, Lawrence Jones, and Anthony Fisher. The lens of liberty. That's what we will look through here right now. So, Anthony, it seems like there's more to this story than meets the eye. If you've got a Superior Court judge who says, you know, this is absolute nonsense. What's really going on?
I don't know enough to know what's really going on. I would certainly take any official word from the NYPD with a huge grain of salt, because they have been trending towards less transparency for years. They used to actually publish their disciplinary records every week, and then out of nowhere, last summer of 2016, it just went away because somebody in the police union discovered a really obscure statute in state law basically saying that publishing these disciplinary records, intra-NYPD disciplinary records, violates the privacy of the officers.
Ow.
So that's kind of rich when they're stealing people's property without due process, not keeping track of it, and apparently unaware of something called Microsoft Excel, which would allow them to keep track of all of this stuff in a really easily searchable database for less than 25 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the data and it says 6.5 million unclaimed in 2014, more than 7 million in 2015, that means it's just too damn hard to get your stuff back, okay?
Yeah.
They always know where you are if they want to tax you, or if they did want to arrest you, they know where you are. But it's not important to hand your stuff back. And why? Because we're letting them get away with it. I don't think that they should have the right to take your property away in the first place if you haven't been actually convicted of anything.
Unfortunately, we have an attorney general who loves civil asset forfeiture, and all sorts of lawmakers, Democrat and Republican, who think that this is a great way to grab cash. But if you went to the IRS and said, you know what, I can't access the database that says how much money I earned last year, would that be a viable defense?
It wouldn't even fly. And the problem is that enough people, there isn't enough people standing up on this issue. It is a crime to take someone else's property without due process. This should be criminal. Now, a lot of people would say, hey, Lawrence is just against asset forfeiture. No. I'm for asset forfeiture when you get a criminal conviction, but you don't have the right to just go to someone's house and take their property because you suspect them of committing a crime. What do we teach our kids? Innocent until proven guilty. Like, this is a known thing. And so the fact that our chief law enforcement officer, Jeff Sessions, refuses to roll back the regulation on this is insane. A lot of people have made this Obama issue. No, it's not. It's Republicans like Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz. The list goes on.
One of the Democrats who's most egregious in this area is Kamala Harris, the senator from California. She's awful when it comes to civil asset forfeiture, and that is a very greedy tool that she has used.
It is, and it's lazy.
Benefit.
It's lazy. Go get a criminal conviction. Go get evidence and prosecute it in the court of law. Don't be lazy. Just take it yourself.
And then the minutia, the process you have to go through to get.
Senator Harris is an ex-prosecutor, and she understands that this makes her job easier, or people who have the job she used to have.
I don't think people are deciding to not get it back because they just want the government to have it after the wonderful experience that they went through being wrongfully accused of something. I think that maybe it's impossible to get it back. They shouldn't even have it in the first place.
The process you have to go through and the expense, it's too much for some people who get sucked into the system. It's very sad. Hey, Anthony, Lawrence, and Kat, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Woo! All right, coming up, the president and congressional Republicans want to finalize a budget so they can get started on tax reform. I'm all for fixing the taxes, but the GOP budget plan would increase the deficit by $1.5 trillion. What's a libertarian solution? We'll talk about that next.